Hello, Ken Spriggs here with the third and last part of my videos showing my brand new Elegoo Mars 3D resin printer. And in this one, I'm showing the completion, the painting of the Mandalorian figure, my first figure that I printed on my 3D printer. So really love this printer. It's quite excellent. And I'm really happy with the print quality. And I'll show you this figure here and how excellent it is. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, and here is my painted rifle so far. What I did was I started with some alclads. Well, I painted the whole thing black, well, most of it black from the hand up through the main gun because I want to do some metallic. So I put on some a mix of some bright aluminum and some regular aluminum, and I came up with that tip. So I painted that first of all because it appears to be that from the images I've seen. Then I mixed in some of my stainless steel to darken it up, and I did the rest of the barrel, which still wasn't dark enough, so I put a little bit of Tamiya gray metallic over it, and it still was looking too light, so I took just a little bit of black and watered it down quite a lot and just airbrushed it over it to give it a really darker finish, which I really like how that turned out right there. The main parts of the gun. And then I used some brown. Let me see, which one did I use? I used Tamiya Brown JGSDF. I picked up a couple of browns because I'm going to use a lot of browns on his outfit. And I did the stock and this part up here as well. A little bit of chrome silver highlighting some of the parts. A little bit of dry brushing. And then the bands holding the scope on appear to be like a gold but kind of tarnished, so I took a little bit of yellow, mixed it in with some chrome silver, and just kind of put it on there. And I probably will do a little bit of weathering on this as well before it's all done. Sorry, I'm trying to get the whole thing in the picture there. But I think that looks pretty cool. It looks pretty accurate to the picture of it. Some pictures I've seen of it, so. Okay, I still have to paint his hand, obviously, to finish that up, but that's mostly done. I like how the alclad turned out on the prong tip of it. It definitely looks like a different kind of a metal than the rest of it, so. All right. All right, so after getting a coat of the Tamiya fine primer on it, the fine surface primer, the gray, I went ahead and got some brown paints onto the main body and the cape. So these are just a base coat. There's going to be several different browns on these and some oil weathering as well. So for the main body, I used brown JGSDF from Tamiya. These are both Tamiya paints. And for the cape, I started with that and got it most of it, but left some patchy parts. And then I went over it and highlighted it with some flat brown, which is darker. Because the cape's going to be a little bit darker. And there will be some darker portions of him once I get it going. But I wanted to get a nice base of the brown over the whole thing so I can then do some other colors on it and get it going on that too. And then here's the cape. Cape looks pretty cool so far. This is definitely going to have some oil washes on it to make it look pretty beat and nasty. Okay. All right, so once that thoroughly dries, and then I got his hand as well, his arm as well. That's one of the downsides of this one. His arm rests on his leg, so I have to do it separately, otherwise I'm not going to get this leg painted, which includes this nice plate here. So I have to get that painted first, then I'm ready to put the arm on. What I might do is figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of the leg, as far as maybe some washes or that kind of thing. And then since this is just a pants color underneath it, I can go ahead and get that plate painted, and then I can get his arm glued on, so I don't have to keep fussing with it separately. It's kind of a hassle. I also want to get his mechanism on his arm painted first too, his flamethrower and that sort of thing. I'm trying to look at some stills and also some shots of this kit built by someone else that I saw on Facebook originally, and also some other shots that I can find out there to try to get some ideas for the coloring. So, and keep in mind, it's certainly changed throughout the series. This is designed more to be like the first episode before he got an upgrade on his armor and he had the shinier shoulder pads and the chest pads, which are nice. This one is still shot to hell and all dirty and nasty, which would be, well, it wasn't just after the first episode, but he certainly had the crap beat out of it by the horn monster, which is displayed obviously on this little base for him. I also got a coat of flat white, not flat white, it's some of the Tamiya primer as well, but a white version, since I'm going to basically have this white and then dingy it up with some skull colors. But I got an initial coat, I need to do another one on it, and then once I get that done, then I can start doing some weathering. Not a ton of painting going on this skull, because it's mostly just going to be oils, making it look really dingy and dirty. I did finish up my second helmet that I made. Try to get that focused. The second print was much better, very few marks that I can see. Looks really good. And for the most part, the outclad came out well, except for right on the top. It's just kind of rough. Looks kind of burnished. It should be all right. I don't really want to do it a third time, so I'm just going to keep it as it is for now. But I certainly can in the future if I want to. I can reprint this again. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. And I think it's going to be nice when it's put together in combination with the other colors that we have going on. So that's pretty much finished for now. Get in there. All right, so let me go ahead and do some more of the, I'll start with some highlighting on the main body of some of the different panels. And a lot of this I'm just going to dry brush, or not dry brush, I'm sorry. I'm going to brush on, because it would be a hassle to try to mask off some of these panels and airbrush them. And it does look fine if you keep it on pretty thick and just try to avoid brush strokes. And probably I'll thin it down just a bit as well. So, all right, so working on some painting details for my figure. I'm really enjoying painting him up. There's a lot of cool different colors and a lot of really cool things to highlight. So I started with some chrome silver, and what I did was I basically dry brushed it to keep it minimal, and I wanted it to remain kind of patchy, and I did over top of like those shells here for his guns. And some of it has a lot on it, but some of it, like those ones there, the bands around them that are the same color as the belt, I tried to keep those kind of rough so it looks like it's a bit rusted. I did some metallic gray, dry brushed onto the buckle there, and the one down on his belt. And on the belts, I used some khaki, and kind of dry brush that on as well, so it would look a bit patchy. And I did the same thing on that pouch and his belt around it. And I used some of the metallic gray on those little nubs there. I don't know what those are supposed to be, but to highlight those. And then some chrome silver on the shells or the bullets on his shoe, on his boot. Same thing. All right. And then on the arms, I use some of the metallic gray to highlight some of the machinery, and I'll put some other colors on there as well. And I did the same thing on his right arm. All right. And then finally I painted up his gun, his holster on his side. And for that one, I used the khaki just by itself for the holster. And a lot of these browns are really subtle shades of each other, and that's what I want to try to keep. I don't want a lot of garish colors on him, but he does have a lot of browns, and he's really dirty and filthy as well. So, and then what I did was I took some of the metallic gray, which is a darker type of metallic, and I mixed it in with some black to make it's dried up in there now, but it made a kind of a dark gunmetal, as it were, and I painted the gun with it. So it gives it that metallic sheen, but it's really dark. And there aren't too many other colors. I might put a little bit of silver on it, and then on the tip of it, just to kind of highlight it a bit, and that goes on his side. So you can see it's a bit of a difference from the main brown that's on there. So, okay, I will continue working on this, but this is coming along pretty good. All right, so I got some more of the browns and different colors on here. I went over the his plating with some light gray. It's actually JN gray. And I didn't put it on really solid. It's kind of, patchy and that sort of thing, because it is going to be weathered and really filthy as well. So I went over the two on his legs, his chest, and then his shoulder pads for now. Let that dry. So I'll be going over those with some other colors. I went over his kind of his top waist part, or his chest part, with some of the, let's see, what do I have there? Some gray-green. And these may or may not be totally accurate, but I'm trying to get some ideas from some screenshots as to the different colors. And then his waist right there above his belt, it's kind of a lighter brown, but not as dark as his pants. And his pants I'm going to make darker, by the way. They're going to be a lot darker than this when I get done with them. But I just took some, I believe it is NATO brown. Oh, wrong one. Yeah, some NATO brown. Put some white in it and just lightened it up a bit. And went over that. And what I'll be doing is the ones that I want to be a little lighter, I'll use some lighter washes of oils on it. The ones I want darker, I'll use darker. Okay, so definitely getting some different colors and some shading. That's kind of the end idea, is that he looks like a patchwork of a bunch of different pieces of clothing that he has over top of them to get that look. But definitely a brown hue to it all. So, okay. All right, so I'm going to keep working on this. All right, so I'm painting the base that goes underneath the rock part of the base. And I'm not sure what it's supposed to look like, but I'm just going to do a metallic. So I got the gloss black onto it. I'm not worried about this part, it's going to be covered. And then what I'm going to do is go over it first of all with some aluminum. See how that looks. And then I thought after that dried I would just put in possibly some streaks of the stainless steel to give it a little different look. I'm kind of trying to go for the look of the Beskar, the little metal rectangles that they have of it, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So, but I thought I would go with that, and then that will complete that part, and then we'll continue working on the rest of the base as well. All right, so I'm painting the base of the rocks, and in contrast to the dark browns that are going to be on the figure, I wanted to go with something a lighter brown, more of a sandy tone. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing in this little part right here where he's stepping. I'm assuming that's supposed to be water since there's some ripples, but there are some really, really obvious vertical horizontal lines, which I don't know why they put that into the mold, or into not the mold, but into the file, but I don't really like those. So I'm thinking of putting either something like a sand over it, or I thought of maybe even water, like something clear, make it look kind of muddy, maybe some 5-minute epoxy and put a little bit of brown into it to make it look muddy. And I might just do that to cover up those really obvious lines. But for the main rocks, I want to have a sandy look. So I started with some dark tan as an underbase, and I'm using the Model Masters because they have a better selection of tans and those types of things for the military colors. Then when that was almost dry, I went over it with some Radome tan, and then finally over it with just some regular sand. Okay, so it's still fairly homogeneous, but I'm going to finish it off with some oils and some different colors like that to give it a sandy rock look. And then I want to figure out what I want to do in this part here as far as how to make that look realistic. But other than that, not a lot of details. Probably some dry brushing is going to go onto this to finish the rock base, because there's going to be the contrast of the skull, which has the lighter, obviously white tones to them. Get in there. Okay, well anyway, and then the dark figure on top. And I also put a coating of gray primer onto the Stormtrooper helmets on spikes. So these are going to add some color because you're going to have like the wood looking spikes and then the white helmets with some black on them, that sort of thing. So they're going to be on there as well, giving it a little bit of color. Okay. All right, so I've begun weathering using some oils, some ab to lung oils, and it's coming out really nice. The great thing about oils is that they take a long time to dry, a very long time to dry. But that's a good thing. The thicker that you put them on, the longer it takes. And then it gives you plenty of time to work with it and take some off if you're not happy with it. So literally, I put a lot onto the figure and let it sit overnight, and I'm still going back and just kind of moving it around or rinsing it off a bit with some thinner. So let me show you a couple of highlights that I did. The skull was pretty much completed, and it was pretty simple. All I did was, after getting it coated in white, I used some Starship Filth, or actually first I used some dead flesh on the teeth just to give it a little bit of a different hue. And then I went over the whole thing with some Starship Filth, which is my go-to weathering. It's a nice dark wash, and it goes over and fills in all the little seams and gaps and really brings out the details, especially on something like this skull. It makes it look like it's filthy and dirty and decrepit. So that turned out really well, and that's all ready to go. And then that'll just go right on to, why can't I get this on there? Get on there. There we go. Okay, so that's going to go on to the sand base, and that's going to be a nice contrast for that. And then you'll have him standing on it with the browns and bring that out as well. All right, so that's looking really cool. And then I just put it on thicker and darker in the little eye sockets so it would really accentuate those. But I think that's looking pretty cool. One other little thing I did, which I really like when you're trying to do something that looks like wood. Let me see if I can get that to focus. There we go. Is to use, so I had a lighter brown and I took some of the darker brown and I streaked it on there. And like I said, that really sat overnight and it was still thick and dark. So then I just took a brush with some thinner and I dabbed it off really good and just kind of dry brushed and made some streaks in it to give it that wood grain kind of a look, because it's just a smooth piece. And once that dries completely, it will set in even more and you'll just see like the dark streaks in it. So it'll accentuate it, which is what I really like about the oils the most. So then we have the Mandalorian himself, and like I said, right now he looks really glossy and kind of wet and sticky, and for now it still is. While it's still drying, and a lot of those colors are just kind of setting in there. I did a lot more rust and different colors on his armor, which I wanted to look really beat up and nasty. I also worked on the one on his leg. Well, all three of them on his leg. His kneecap and that one right there. And I put some highlights on the boots, some darker highlights as well. Kind of work those in. The brown in the pants is starting to settle down and dry on there. As you can see right there on the sleeve. Okay, so it's hard to tell right now since it's still fairly glossy how that's going to look, but I'm happy with the way a lot of the colors are looking, and I could fiddle with this endlessly if I wanted to, but I'm going to let that sit for now and just let it dry really well for maybe about 2 or 3 days, or at least a day or so, and then I'll go back in, and if I need to wipe some off again, that's fine, just to get it to where I want it to be. I also did a little bit on the Stormtrooper helmets. I used a wash on those to highlight some of the detail in them. And again, these are going to be really filthy and dirty. They're not going to be shiny, glossy white. But I might go over this with a little bit more white to bring up some of those colors again. And I still have to work on the spike, give it a wood image as well. So, okay. All right, so coming along really well. I'm going to let that just settle in. And then ultimately, once the oil's fully dry on this, if I need to, I can go back over with a flat coat. Usually I don't need to. Once it dries completely, it tends to come down to at least a satin finish, if not like a matte finish. So, okay. All right, so I've let the oils dry at least 24 hours, some of them even longer on the figure. So I'm able to handle it. It's not coming off on my fingers, but it's still feeling like I can feel the texture of it. So what I did, and I did this on my thing from another world as well, is I used some pastels, and I have 3 sets here from Tamiya. I have a orange rust, gunmetal silver, a snow, soot, and dark rust. And then the one I used the most on this was the sand, light sand, and mud. The mud's a nice brown. So what I did was I just took the brush part of it and just brushed it over top of the dark brown in his pants. And it dulled it down and blended it in some more, and it looks a lot more natural. And I used some of the other lighter colors on the rest of his outfit. And then I also used some of the metals the silver and the gunmetal and some of the rusts on his armor, and highlight some of those parts as well, like the band around his knee there for the armor on his knee. Sorry for the shakiness. You can see a little bit of silver in there. So the pastels are nice for that. You brush them on and they give it a kind of a look of the metal. So a combination of the dry brushing and the pastels, things like that, really bring out some of those colors. So I think he's looking pretty good. I really like his chest plate. That looks like it's really been blasted and rusted and ready to fall apart, or as he says, it lost its integrity, which is for sure. At one point it was hanging off of his chest and he was doing something with the wiring in it. I'm not sure what the wiring was for. But he's looking pretty good. So at this point I also did his arm and got that looking the same. In the middle a little bit with the pastels as well. I just want to go over that little triangle just a little bit more with some white to make it look a little less sloppy. And then I'll be ready to go ahead and glue his arm on and glue his pistol on to the side over here. All right. And then at that point, it's all coming together here. I started working on the Stormtrooper skulls. I just put some flat black in their eye lenses and then some Tamiya smoke over it to make it clear. Focus. Use a little bit of Starship filth oils over it and then wipe most of it off. So I want to get the wood painted, and then once I do that I can tell if I need to do any more with these helmets so that they're looking a little whiter. I don't want them to be quite as dingy as the skull, but I don't want them to be like pure white either. So I can work on those two and get those finished up. But it's all coming together, so just about ready to start putting it all together and wrapping up this build. All right, so I got most of the kit together. I have the base glued together. Completed the wood spikes for the Stormtrooper helmets. I think those turned out pretty cool. And they're glued into place in the base. I have the skull glued into place as well. And what I did for the skull is I took a little bit of 5-minute epoxy and I added a little bit of white paint into it. You can kind of see it there, it's a little whiter there, so it blended in more to the rock. I think it helps it meld in a little bit better to the base. And then in the center there where those lines were, I put some 5-minute epoxy over top of it so it's smoother. Once that fully sets up, I'm going to mix a little bit of 5-minute epoxy and put a little bit of some of the brown paint into it, swirl it a little bit, and then put it over top again to kind of mask that in. And that final coat will be where I'll glue his foot down onto it as well. And I can either leave that glossy or I might just put some weathering over top of it, we'll see. All right, so the base is just about done. All right, I have his main bodies all completed. I did do a little bit more. I did got some metallic brown and put that onto his sleeves, as you can see. Put some on right there as well. And I have his helmet is glued onto the cape. And I did just a little more airbrushing on the cape to give it a little bit of gradient on it. So, all right, so I just have to glue the helmet or the cape onto the body, his gun in place, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and get him glued on for the final kit, and then we'll go ahead and show the final reveal. And here is my completed Mandalorian 3D printed figure. My very first 3D printed figure from my Mars Elegoo resin printer. Very, very happy with how it turned out and the quality of it. Try to get a little closer and see some detail on there. And I've shown these different parts separately with his battered armor and his helmet. In the base with the horned beast skull and the spiked Stormtrooper helmets. Try to get some close-ups there. So the resin printers are just fantastic as far as the detail that it prints. That you're just not going to get from a filament printer. I mean, they have their own issues and they have their own drawbacks at certain points, but really it's a much better quality print. And I don't mind the extra cleanup. It's not that big of a deal. Get yourself a good system in place, and it's not going to be a problem for you. Yeah, so you just look at that cape. That cape would not look like that with all the rough detail in it. It looked like a real beat up cloth if you did this on a filament printer and it had a bunch of striations and lines in it. So definitely a fantastic fantastic print for sure. So I highly recommend the Mars Elegoo printer. I highly recommend this figure from Carlos Martinez, and I will put the link in the description again if you want to check this out. And like I said, keep in mind I did print this at half scale, so mine's about 6 inches in height. The one that he has, the regular full file, is about 12 inches. But on the average resin printer, you're not going to be able to print this. You would need to have a larger print area to do it, especially with the base and his cape. Or they suggested doing those on a filament printer, but I don't see the point in that. It would kind of ruin the quality. But all right, so very happy with this. Very happy with how it turned out. Very happy with the quality of it. So I will be doing more of these in the future for sure, and certainly putting my 3D printer to work when I learn how to make some other parts for it and such, or create my own files. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video. I will be working on more 3D printed items in the future. For now, I'm going to go ahead and turn my attention back to the child from the Mandalorian and be working on that as well. I do have some ideas for some of the parts on that to use my 3D printer for, so we'll take a look at that. But thank you to all my new subscribers. Thanks again to Carlos Martinez for the excellent figure of the Mandalorian. I definitely recommend checking him out if you're interested in this particular file for this. And I put the link in the description. But I will see my subscribers here again shortly, and I'll be having a new video that I've already begun on working on the NY3D Creations the child or the baby Yoda. Don't call me baby Yoda. and working on that kit. All right, thank you.